We have people beginning to join us now. So we'll give everyone a couple of minutes. We have 104 registrants, so I want to make sure people have a couple minutes to get themselves situated, so to speak. So it looks like we're cooking here. People another minute or so. Those of you that have joined already, my name is Nellie Brown, and I direct the Workplace Health and Safety Program, which is part of Cornell School of Industrial and Labor Relations Outreach Division. I'm also associated with the Buffalo CoLab. And we will be getting started in another minute or so. Try to give people a couple minutes to get themselves joining us. And then we will start our program. Okay, so for those who are joining us today, welcome and thank you for attending our Health and Safety series. My name is Nellie Brown. I direct the Workplace Health and Safety Program, which is part of the School of Industrial and Labor Relations at Cornell University. I'm also associated with the Buffalo CoLab, which is the Buffalo office of Cornell, ILR. I'm a certified industrial hygienist, so health and safety is what I do for a living. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues, Veronica Moore and Stephanie Olszewski. Veronica will be taking the questions today, so please put them into the Q&A box rather than the chat so that she only has one place where she needs to look for questions, and she will feed them to me through the workshop, as well as we'll take questions at the end too. Now, Stephanie will put into the chat a link that will let you reach the recording of today's program, as well as the recording of our past programming and links to, of course, the upcoming webinars in our series. There will be 10 total in the series, and today's program is the second one in that series. So I'm going to share my screen, and we will dig in here. All righty. So for today's program, we will be looking at the health and safety issue of joint labor management health and safety committees. And we'll be looking at getting them not only formed initially, but also looking at ways, of course, to help them succeed. So in our topics for today, we'll be talking about getting a joint labor management health and safety committee off the ground. Some issues of committee structure, as well as how the committee might operate, the sorts of things that it might do. And if you're drawing one up from scratch, or if you're looking over your current arrangements and looking at maybe some other things that you hadn't considered, these might get you considering some new things, and that's helpful. We're also going to take a look at helping committees succeed. Oftentimes they've died off, or they became inactive. People started them years ago, and then the members sort of dropped off and things never happened. And so sometimes committees get stuck. And so we're going to be taking a look at some of the things that I think are the most important in helping a program really succeed with a joint labor management committee. Some things like ground rules, agenda, roles, ways to help you reach consensus with decision-making. If you hadn't considered that, maybe you want to look at it. And also what I consider to be very important, which is to do a meeting evaluation. So let's dig in and take a look at some of these issues. Now, I thought this particular topic would be helpful, not just because it's helpful overall, but also because here in New York State, we have just designated SARS-CoV-2 as an airborne infectious agent. We did that last month. And of course, one of the provisions in the New York State HERO Act, or Health and Essential Rights Act, is that as of November, employers must cooperate with workers who want to establish joint labor management health and safety committees. And these committees, as shown in the HERO Act, could address any health and safety issue and not just airborne infectious diseases. And this particular part of the HERO Act applies to both the public and private sectors. So let's take a look at getting started. What might a committee be? What would be its membership? What might be its duties, and so on? So when it comes to sizes of committees, and looking at studies over the years, you typically find in most workplaces, committees might range anywhere from 6 to 16 members. I like to remind people not to make it too large of a committee, because sometimes with too many members, it becomes sort of unwieldy. Keep in mind, you can always have subcommittees and task forces to do specific things or to follow up on particular topics. You might also consult people outside your committee. Non-committee members or outside experts can always be consulted when they're needed. You don't necessarily have to make these sorts of people regular committee members. Now, when it comes to the ratio of labor to management members, I'd like to recommend that you consider having equal numbers, even if the exact numbers of members on each side is unspecified if you happen to have a collective bargaining agreement. But I think having equal numbers, equal voices, is very helpful in making committees work well. Now, who could serve on a committee? Well, this can vary. You find that workplaces have all kinds of different arrangements. Sometimes committee members are permanent, sometimes they change. You might want to consider that members of the committee represent relevant groups. For example, if you have a workplace represented by more than one union, you may want to make sure that you have representatives of all the unions on the site. Because different shifts may actually do different tasks or have very different kinds of problems, it might be very useful to have representatives from all workplace shifts represented on the committee, or representatives from a variety of different departments. Again, so you have multiple points of view, multiple expertise. You may also consider the technical skills that some of your members may need to have. For example, if in your workplace you find yourself needing to solve a number of very specialized problems in which backgrounds on engineering or health science would be very useful, then it's nice to have those types of experts. But again, you can always consult them as well. But keep in mind who actually serves on your committee can have a major impact on how your committee actually works and the sorts of things it might reasonably be expected to accomplish. Now, how are the management members on your committee ever selected? Well, they might be appointed, or they might serve by virtue of their positions in the organization, such as you might very well want to have the safety director serving from the management portion of your team. Now, what about the workforce members? Now, whether your workplace is organized or unorganized, there are a variety of different ways this might work. For example, union members might serve by virtue of their union positions. For example, it might be useful to have a grievance chair as a member of a committee, especially because sometimes in committees, you might very well deal with issues that if they don't get resolved, may very well go on to become grievances. Now, you may very well have members of your committee elected by the union membership, or of course, in a unorganized workplace by the workforce as a whole. They may be members that are appointed by union leadership. Or for example, they might be elected or appointed by the union, but then approved by management. In some workplaces, management insists on that. Or you may have that in your collective bargaining agreement. Sometimes workforce members in unorganized workplaces may simply be appointed by management, or management might simply ask the workforce for volunteers, and people might serve based upon their sincere interest in making a difference in health and safety. Now, when it comes to membership in the committee, how long should members actually serve? Who will the chair be? Might the members rotate among the offices, where some people serve as the chair, others by secretarial recorder, or so on? How are they paid? For example, are they paid at their hourly rate for the working time they miss? And might there, for example, be a limit to the number of work hours that workers are allowed to devote to committee work? Now, what about a committee meeting schedule? Now, some committees simply have a schedule to meet, but keep in mind that issues arise in a workplace. You may very well convene a meeting specially to address a particular concern. Or you may have your committee having to meet when there's an actual emergency. A serious accident has occurred, or there's been a disaster, or some major event has cropped up. The way, for example, the pandemic arose, or there was an issue of violence in your workplace or whatever. And so your meeting is convened to address that specific kind of problem. Now, it's very typical for committees to have meetings at regular intervals anyway, but you may very well find these other meetings may in fact be called because of the necessity of them. Now, keep in mind, you may have these as guidelines. They may be in your collective bargaining agreement, or they may be part of your workplace's policy. They may be specified, they may not be. Now, do these meetings occur during work time? Might they ever occur during non-working time and people are asked to come in and participate? They may or may not be paid, of course, for that, but of course, we would like to see people always paid for this additional devotion to their job, and paid, of course, the appropriate overtime for it. They might very well be a combination of working and non-working time, where a certain amount may be allotted from the workplace to serve this way, but other times may also be asked of people. Now, what are the sorts of things a health and safety committee could do? Keep in mind when we talk about functions, these are some examples of things that people are doing across the US in various joint labor management committees. For example, a health and safety committee may recommend changes or additions to various hazard reduction or elimination methods. They may even be charged with inspection authority or authority to shut down an unsafe piece of equipment or a process. And these may be written into your collective bargaining agreement or be part of your workplace policy, or simply agreed on because you want to draw on a workforce's expertise and their ability to give you ideas from the shop floor, which may be the most valuable ideas you get. Now, a health and safety committee may be charged to make plant inspections. Many committees do this on a regular basis, walk around their plant or use a specific type of inspection tool, like a job hazard analysis, a vulnerability analysis, a process failure analysis, or a risk map or something of that sort. It is very common for health and safety committee members to be called upon to accompany official inspectors when they make their inspections, such as an inspector from OSHA or at the state level, like here in New York State from PESH. It's very common for health and safety committees to do reflections on a workplace. For example, to study a workplace's health and safety performance, perhaps to review or analyze various reports, which may be done internally or they may have been done by outside consultants or experts. Some committees actually do take samples or make measurements of their own. A committee might access the organization's data, such as on health and safety issues or workers' compensation data, things like that, and as a result, make evaluations or recommendations based on this kind of information. Sometimes it is agreed that a health and safety committee will be automatically notified by the employer of any exposure measurements that are considered to be potentially dangerous. The health and safety committee might maintain records and make reports of its own and issue its own reports to the workforce, to management, and so on. It is also very common for health and safety committees to be the group that deals with workers' fear to report problems. In other words, they act as the group that receives workers' issues or complaints because people are concerned about reporting problems directly to their supervisors or to management in general. And that is very common. Now, certainly in a workplace that has a union, it's very common for workers to bring their concerns directly to the union. But in an unorganized workplace, the Health and Safety Committee helps to serve as that intermediate buffer, so to speak. Okay, let's look at some other functions that committees are known to provide. We do have a very important concern, and that is that health and safety committees can serve as a way to promote education among workers. And they may, in fact, be charged as a committee to help oversee training in terms of its content or the topics that are covered. It is very common for health and safety committees to show their value because they're able to reduce the number of safety-related complaints filed with regulatory agencies, and yet at the same time, without infringing on workers' rights to do so if they choose. It is always the right of workers, of course, to go to OSHA or other federal agencies to make complaints. But if a health and safety committee helps to field a lot of those issues ahead of time, then the problem may be able to be fixed, completely resolved even, without infringing on workers' rights. And that can be very helpful. Now, it is also very common across the US to find that health and safety committee members often attend safety conferences. They might be local or national. They may participate in professional organizations or societies and bring those learnings back to their workplace. A health and safety committee is often tasked to establish procedures for handling suggestions or recommendations that might come from the workforce concerning health and safety issues. I'm going to pause at this point and see if there are any particular questions that have arisen on the first part of our program. Okay, I think Veronica is booting back up again. She got accidentally disconnected. So let me see if I can see. Nope, there don't appear to be any open questions at the moment. So I'm going to move on to one of the big problems that has been presented to me in past workshops that I've given on health and safety committee skills. So much of the time, people will say to me that they have a committee and it's been working for a long time. It just isn't working well. So what is it that goes wrong here? It's not that health and safety committees don't want to get things done, they do. But the issue tends to boil down to a problem of process or of tasks. So let's see what's going on here and what we might perhaps do about it. You tend to find with health and safety committees, as with any committee, group process is key to making the committee work, regardless of what the tasks are that you want to accomplish. Now, of course, the tasks are what the group is trying to accomplish. They could be actions, they might be making decisions, they might be holding discussions of topics, incidents, accidents, new hazards, changes to be made to the workplace, and so on. Now, process is how the work of the group is actually performed. And you tend to find that it's process issues that block the work on the tasks. People join committees typically because they're sincere about wanting to accomplish things. But making a group work together is not always easy. And when a committee first starts up, people tend to behave a lot like teenagers. They tend to be very much argumentative, rebellious. They tend to have problems at first, trusting each other and making the actual group work as a whole. As time goes on, a group can gain confidence and become more mature and more grown up, about how they work. So how might we reach that lovely process where people are trusting and the actual work of the committee proceeds well? All right, so let's reflect a bit on this. I think all of us have attended meetings of some kind, whether they're in our workplace, they're organizations we belong to, whatever they might be. So I've made a little apology here to Charles Dickens that it was the best of meetings, it was the worst of meetings. Little a flashback to A Tale of Two Cities. But I'd like to have you think for a bit about meetings of any kind that you've attended. Now, I'm sure you have some time in your experience attending meetings that were wonderful. So what were the sorts of things that made them so good? Sometimes people say to me, well, they started and ended on time. People followed the agenda. It was wonderful. We actually got decisions made. We got things done, believe it or not. It was fantastic. And people treated each other really well. Then you have the other side of this, what I like to call the meetings from hell. And I think we've all been to meetings from hell. Okay, so what is it that made them so bad? Well, in some of my past workshops, people asked for help on their health and safety committee meeting skills because of the things that really went wrong. And these are some of the things that people have said to me. See if they sound familiar to you. It was a bullshit session. We never get anything done. They're just time wasters. Nothing ever happens. One person dominates the meeting and bullies everyone else, getting us all pushed into doing stuff we don't want to do, or just takes over with a discussion of some topic that isn't even on the agenda. There always seem to be sidebar conversations. We've got stuff going, but then there are people who are talking on the side, chatting, whatever. You know, they're always making us feel uncomfortable and they interrupt everything. Some people do all the work of the committee and the rest do nothing. Or a variation of that. Some people do the bulk of the work year after year and they get burned out. Nobody wants to be secretary anymore. Nobody wants to be president anymore. I mean, because they carry the whole meeting on their backs and they're tired of doing this. Okay, how about this one? People don't show up for it, or they forget to do their assignments. They show up unprepared, so we can't get anything done. Does this one sound familiar? We can't seem to make any decisions. We argue endlessly over priorities. Or they never start on time and they drag on forever. We can't seem to stick to the agenda. We get off topic and as a result, we don't get anything done. Those are some of the ones I've heard a lot. I mean, more and more times than I can tell you. So I think one way to address some of these problems is to have ground rules. So let's think about having ground rules for a meeting. Now, ground rules are things that you can have printed up. You can hang them on the wall of your meeting room. You could have them on a document, say up at the top or in a lower corner if you're making virtual meetings, so that they're always there. And the reality is then, if something happens that violates a ground rule, people can point to the ground rule and say, hey, we agreed, we were going to do this, okay, or not do that. Or people can make reference to it on your agenda document. Now, some examples of ground rules you might want to consider. How about this one? Meetings will start and end on time. Or this one, show up on time and come prepared. How about one devoted to no sidebar conversations? Or a similar kind of idea, let everyone participate. How about this one? Listen with an open mind. or attack the problem, not the person. Now, I think it's important for when a group first begins to develop their own ground rules, because that way you get buy-in from everybody. They all had a say in what the ground rules were going to be. They all agree to abide by them. And so if a meeting happens and a ground rule is violated, people can point to it or remind everyone about it. And the group, as a result, gets to sort of settle down and follow its own rules. These can be very, very helpful. And I highly recommend that in your first meeting, you establish these so you have them. And you can always, of course, modify them, add to them, whatever, as time goes on. Now, another very important part of meeting skills is to have a very good agenda. So I've given you a little format here that just gives you an idea of some of the things that people tend to find most helpful on the agenda. Now, I'm going to suggest to you and make a very strong suggestion about this is that once you put together the agenda for an upcoming meeting, you send it to the committee members. And if you have outside speakers or whatever coming in, you might want to send it to them too. We want people to have the agenda in advance. It's very helpful because they can see what's going to be happening at the meeting, how much time they're going to have, so they can, as a result, adjust their report, their presentation, whatever it might be, to match the time they're given. And it also is a nice reminder for people generally. That way, they have a little time before the meeting to prepare for something if they forgot they promised something they were going to do. Now, on an agenda, we want to have, of course, the date, the time, the location, and it's virtual, of course, that might be a web location. We'd like to have on there the purpose of the session if it's going to have one in particular. For example, you might have a guest speaker that you're going to introduce a topic, particular health and safety concern, perhaps, that you'd like people to be aware of or updated on. You might have, for example, a desired outcome or more than one. For example, let's say at the meeting, you've decided that after having discussed this particular issue at previous meetings, you're going to make a decision today about it. So these are useful items so that people know that the meeting does have some particular focus to it. Now, you also have on the agenda some roles there at the top of the slide. I'm going to be showing you the importance of these roles and the need for them at every meeting. Someone has to be the facilitator for that meeting. Someone will be the recorder and someone the timekeeper. And I'll give you some ideas to make those roles work in just a moment. Now, the rest of the agenda is devoted to what it is you're actually going to be doing here in terms of the time, the topic, and the person either initiating that topic, for example, initiating a discussion about something or holding a vote on it, or it might be the person reporting on the issue, the study, data, a review, anything that you might be reporting on. Now, these are useful because then with the agenda in advance, the people who are assigned these various things know how much time they have to work with, and therefore they can adjust what they're doing or speaking about to match the time allotted. Okay, let's take a look at committee roles. Again, these are things that make committees work really well and very, very smoothly. Now, you want these roles for every meeting. It doesn't mean that these are cast in stone and the same person has to do them for every meeting. They can rotate around. And in fact, it can be very useful to do that because it's nothing like being facilitator for a little while and getting the chance to experience what it's like to address a group of unruly members on some occasions. You also want a recorder for each meeting. This is the person who takes minutes, and the timekeeper who helps people, of course, stay on the agenda. Now, sometimes the people in these roles are themselves going to make a presentation at the meeting. If that's the case, it's very simple. If you, for example, are the facilitator, you need to ask someone, okay, look, I'm going to be making the presentation for the next, say, 10 minutes. Would someone else please be facilitator for those 10 minutes? And then I'll be back doing my facilitation. But you can't really do two things at once. You can't be facilitator, recorder, or timekeeper and make a presentation at the same time. It's simply just not doable. So we want to make sure that people are able to do their various roles and make the meeting be very smooth. Okay, I say these roles are very important. So what are they? Well, the facilitator may or may not be the chair of the committee. It doesn't have to be. You can decide in your committee how that's going to work, or if the facilitator is just simply going to rotate from meeting to meeting, whereas the chair would not. Now, when it comes to the facilitator's actual duties, the facilitator guides the group process. So this is the person, for example, that helps to introduce the meeting, make sure that the process is really guided in terms of, okay, here's what we're going to be doing today. This is what's on the agenda. Is everyone agreed to the agenda? This is the person who asks for perhaps any discussion of minutes from the last meeting, or if there's any new business that couldn't be put on the agenda because there wasn't the opportunity for it, or we didn't know about it in time. Or maybe you have to scrap the agenda for today because something serious has happened and you need to address that. So the facilitator helps to do that. The facilitator allows each member to be heard. This is very important. You know, there are people who are not, for example, likely to speak up very easily, and you may want to call on them or ask them to give us their opinion, or say, you know, I'd like to call on you later today for your opinion. We haven't heard from you in a while, and that gives that person a heads up. It also helps to control the sidebar conversations and put an end to them. It makes sure that everybody feels valued, and that is very important, especially if you want people to stay on the committee and work well together. We want them to be respectful of each other. Now, and the facilitator may very well suggest processes. In a little while, I'm going to give you some idea of some of the different ways that groups can make decisions, and this may be something the facilitator may be offering, such as an alternative way to make a decision that particular day. Or the person may suggest that this is where we need to maybe think about having a task force to work on this, or a subcommittee to run with this idea. Or maybe we just don't have enough data, we need to gather some more. This is where the facilitator can help suggesting some things that might be followed through on. All in all, the facilitator's most important, really overall duty is to keep the group focused on the task at hand. Now, I'm going to show you later the idea of the parking lot if you've never used one, but it's nice to be able to capture the group's ideas. And some of them simply cannot be handled in meeting that particular day, or they're so off topic, there's just no way they can be actually handled, but you want to get them saved and valued. So there are ways to do this, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, what about the recorder? Well, if your meeting is live, I highly recommend you have something that's visible, like a flip chart, but it could be a whiteboard, anything like that. But if you do use a flip chart, do not flip the pages ever. Instead, detach them and hang them on the wall. Now, the reason why I say that is really, well, more than one reason, but I would say to you that, you know, it's nice to be able to follow the meeting very well. And, you know, we all get, a little, shall we say, mental field trips. We get to thinking about something else. We lose track of where the meeting is. And I'm sure you've been at meetings where somebody suddenly interrupts the meeting to bring up the idea of, I thought we were talking about X. What happened? And then everybody groans, rolls their eyes and said, we got off of X, we finished X, we're now on Y. Where were you? Whereas if you have these things on a flip chart, someone who's taken a little mental field trip can look up at the flip charts and see for themselves, oh, okay, we did that issue, we're now moving on to something else. And it's less embarrassing, it's much smoother for the meeting to move on. and you have a lot less of that rolling of the eyes and groaning. Now, another nice thing about flip charts is that at the end of the meeting, you can use your smartphone, take pictures of the flip charts, and guess what? You have instant meeting minutes. Now, what if your meeting is virtual? Then I would say share a common document. And as you record the notes, people can see these things going up onto that shared document. Again, at the end of the meeting, you have the ability to save that document and distribute it once again for instant meeting minutes. Over the years, I hear a lot of complaints from safety committees who say the secretary spends a lot of time outside the meeting, typing up the minutes, consolidating them. And then people say, but I don't remember us agreeing to that. How did it end up in the minutes? And then you get arguments about it. So it's nice to have something up where people can see it. Now, remember, if you're the recorder, don't drive yourself crazy. You only have to record key ideas, such as major topics, decisions made about them, what the next actions are going to be. Maybe that item's going to go on the agenda again next time. Those are the sorts of things you want to put down. It's not every word or detail of the meeting. Now, the advantage of having things in clear sight on a flip chart or a shared document is that people see what's being recorded, and they can correct any misunderstandings. That way, people can say to you, oh, no, what you got to, that's not really what I meant, or that's really the wrong word. I really meant so-and-so, or that's not what we decided. What we said was X. And you can fix it right away while the group can see that and all agree on it. And that's incredibly valuable. Now, the other idea I was mentioning a few minutes ago is this idea of the parking lot. It could be a flip chart labeled parking lot, or it could be a little spot on your document, a little square, for example, labeled parking lot. And the idea here is that a parking lot is a great place to capture ideas that perhaps were not on the agenda, that someone came up with during the meeting. And if someone was always dominating the meeting or bullying people, and they come up with things that are completely off topic, you can put them on the parking lot. That's respectful. It shows the idea is not lost, that people did indeed record it and take advantage of the idea being presented. And then people later on can make a decision as a committee what they want to do with the parking lot things. And that again helps the meeting move a lot more smoothly. Okay, every meeting needs to have a timekeeper. Now, the only complaints that I've really received about timekeepers is one particular organization where people said the timekeeper just cuts people off. That's not really what the timekeeper is supposed to be doing. Okay, so on our agenda, we had start and end times for each of those speakers or topics, all right? The timekeeper keeps the group adhering to the agenda. The timekeeper lets the speakers know when their allotted time is, in other words, moving along. Now, some common useful things the timekeeper can tell a speaker. For example, you can say to the speaker, you're about halfway through your time. That lets people pace themselves better. You can say to the speaker, note your time is almost done, such as saying to the person you have 1 minute left. Now, of course, if this is a live meeting, make sure that 1 minute is the right finger being held up and not an insult, okay? And also to let the speaker know when their time is up. That way, if they need to wind up or say something concluding, whatever, they can do it. Now, of course, committee members can always decide if the issue warrants having more time allotted to it, or if maybe we need to spend the rest of the meeting on this or actually come to a decision on it. And the other agenda items should perhaps be tabled for the next meeting, or if maybe some other action is needed, like, wow, this issue really needs a task force for it, or, I think we need to work out some more data collection on this thing, or maybe we need to make a decision on how we want to proceed with this thing. It's not something we can just leave at this point. And that lets the committee take the actions needed on the particular item. And yet, through all of this, we end up respecting people's time, respecting the agenda, and keeping the meeting flowing smoothly. So that's why I say every meeting needs a facilitator, a recorder, and a timekeeper. Okay, now the group needs to do the tasks, okay, which is what the group was formed to do anyway. And we talked about some of those functions earlier. For example, when you think about the common things any health and safety committee has to do, they always have to prepare the agenda for the next meeting, although, of course, that might evolve directly from the recorder's notes, and that works pretty straightforwardly. But identifying issues, and often things come into the committee in between meetings, and the agenda might end up being rather fluid than what you had originally imagined. We have to be prepared for those things. Now, of course, we expect the committee to discuss the issues that come before it. We know that the committee often has to make selections between things, prioritize different things that come before it, maybe look at things they want to investigate further, maybe take measurements on or review data about. And so it's important for a committee to understand how they might make decisions about these things, selecting their criteria for how they actually make decisions. I'm going to talk about that next because decisions are, again, a big stumbling block for health and safety committees. They have trouble coming to decisions, and there are different ways of making decisions, and we'll explore that. And of course, the health and safety committee is expected to come up with plans of action of way they're going to tackle the things that they, in essence, decided to do, things that need further work, accidents that we need to go back and look at root cause, anything that you might be doing as a health and safety committee will need planning for. And of course, for some of those things, there may be subcommittees or task forces formed to do that. All right, so a big stumbling block people have said to me over the years is, how do committees make decisions? All right, well, there are different levels of group involvement. So let's see if any of these sound familiar. Let's start at the bottom, decision by lack of response. This is where the committee meeting simply argued and debated and fussed and whatever, but they never came up with any final decision, although a number of avenues may have come up in the process. So what happens is the committee's officers often simply after the meeting say, you know, we didn't get anywhere. Let's just go with this, and they do it, okay? All right, decision by authority means that someone in charge of the committee or higher up in the organization takes whatever the committee came up with and makes a decision. It may or may not have been what the committee itself recommended that everybody do. Okay, we have decision by authority with advice. This is where the committee makes its recommendations and the authority works with those, trying to see which ones can be implemented now or later, which ones need budgeted for. Basically, they take the advice of the committee seriously, but they make the decision, not the committee. Okay, we can have decision by minority. People often complain about this, which is where you have a lot of disgruntled people in your committee. A few of them feel very strongly about something in particular, and so they end up, in essence, bulldozing everybody else and getting their way, and that's basically the way it goes. Now, majority rule is where you hold a vote by your committee. Now, of course, voting can be a very powerful way to get things done, but always keep in mind, what if the majority is a very slim one? In which case you have a very, very large vocal minority that is not happy about the way things are going to be done. And I don't think I need to give more examples of that. I think we've all had that situation face us. And of course, we've sometimes seen it in the news as well. Now, consensus is something I like to suggest very strongly as a way you consider. as your decision-making criteria. Consensus is where you come to a decision that everybody feels they can live with and support. It's not going to be ideal. A lot of people won't be overly happy with it, but you can live with it. It's not perfect, but you can manage with it. Now, of course, sometimes you might be actually lucky enough to get unanimity, but that might be a miracle for some committees. So, how might we promote consensus? How can we even reach consensus? How is it possible to get some idea of the things that people might feel they could actually live with? I'm going to give you one tool that helps to achieve consensus. It's called multivoting. Now, I'll give you this by example because I think that's the easiest way to envision how this might work for you. Let's say that you have several options on the table. I'm going to suggest 10. Now, these might be, for example, 10 items that the committee has had put before it. None of them seem, say, dramatically urgent, but they're all things the committee wants to eventually tackle. So how do they decide what to do first? All right, so let's say we give each member of the committee 3 votes in this example, all right? Because you say, well, you know, our committee can only do so much at the present time. We think we might be able to attack 3 items to start out with, and we'd like to get some successes under our belt and make our committee look like it's really working. So how about we decide on 3? But with multi-voting, what we do is each committee can use their 3 votes any way they want. For example, a person might decide they feel, strongly about 3 different items. They put 1 vote on each of the 3. All right. But other people might feel like, well, I'd really like to see this one. And they put 2 votes on it and 1 on something else. Or someone might feel very passionately that a particular item is really the way the group ought to go. So they want to make sure this one is one of the 3 that gets picked. So they put all 3 of their votes on the one they feel strongly about. Now, you take a look at what you've got. So let's say you have these 10 items on a flip chart, or they might be on a shared document, and people go and put their little check marks on, beside each item, using their 3 votes the way they choose. And then you sit back and you look at the items that have the most votes. Now, the way that multi-voting helps you to reach a priority and really winnow down a list is that what you get is people voting the way they feel, and hopefully the options that they can get strongly behind and support very well. Multi-voting is also a great way to winnow down a long list, help you to prioritize things, and so you can get a bunch of items really winnowed down to something that you can begin to tackle. Because people vote their passion, you therefore have a clear indication of the things they're willing to get behind and put their energy in. Yes, I have a cat. So this is a super ball. Go for it, cat. There you go. Okay. All righty. One of the last tools that I like to promote for any meeting is that you spend the last couple of minutes or so, even running a couple of minutes over if you have to, by doing a meeting evaluation. This is very simple, and you can again do it on a flip chart or a shared document, and I'm going to recommend you keep this as easy as possible. 2 columns, plus and minus. So what do you do? Well, every committee member is asked in turn, how did the meeting go? On the plus side, what went well this time? And on the minus side, what would we like to do better next time? This gives you, as a group, a chance to pat yourselves on the back for the good stuff, the things that went well as give you a chance to resolve to do better next time. This gives you the chance as a group to gain confidence working with each other and to realize that you're building skills. And it ends the meeting literally on more of a positive note because it gives you a chance to look back and say, you know, we all did well today. You know, we stuck to the agenda, or we made a decision on some important stuff. Wow, this is great. Or we actually decided on how we're going to move forward on an item of vast importance to our organization. We're doing well. And you get a chance to see as a group how you're maturing. And boy, this is so valuable to see how you're progressing as a group. And you know, as groups get to working with each other as members, you get to value each other, and then you gain confidence and you gain trust, and you get better as time goes on. Now, keep in mind that over time, we know that members of a meeting will change. You know, people will need to drop out, or they'll want to join, and you'll make a space for them. Or somebody has something major happening in their work or in their life, and they just can't spend time on the meeting right now, and they need to drop out, and we need to replace them at least temporarily. Things happen. This is life, okay? Which means that every time that the group changes its membership, sometimes they go back to the beginning and end up behaving like teenagers in rebellion again. But the more as time goes on that your group gains trust, you can absorb new members easily and more smoothly. And your beginning time becomes very short, and you gain trust quickly with your new membership. And so this can be very helpful. You learn as time goes on. Okay, so this is the end of the formal part of my presentation. So I'm going to stop my share and again, ask for questions. I have a rather large group today, but I would like to take questions and see how things go. I noticed somebody raised their hand, so could you put a question into the Q&A? Oh, I had a nice compliment. Yes, thank you very much. I'm so glad this is working for you. Let me get that light out of the way. It can be kind of hard to deal with it. So I'm hoping it presented some good ideas for you. So any questions at this point, Veronica?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. Well, I will go ahead and allow each of the attendees now to speak. You can then unmute yourselves. And if you would like to interact with me, you're welcome to do so. Let me try to make sure I have everybody accounted for. Okay. We'll do this. Okay. Get down the list here.
Hello.
Okay, let me just get down here to the bottom. Let's see here. Okay, I think I have everybody allowed to talk. I have one attendee, Monica W., who has an older version of Zoom, and I need to promote you to a panelist to allow you to talk. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay, so I think everybody in attendance today should be able to unmute themselves, and you can talk to me if you would like. So feel free to do that. We still have about 6 minutes or so of our original time allotted. Okay, so Howard, you have your hand up.
No, I don't have my hand up. I think it was from some other meeting.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how to take it down.
Okay, let's see anyone else's hand up.
I'm sorry. I just
So
wanted to say,
just speak.
sorry. I just wanted to say thank you. I can say that my company that I originally came from, we did this. We used the exact same methods that you had in here, and they worked extremely well. And so I want to thank you for sharing that and making it where other people can understand in such a very clear and succinct way. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I also run this, specifically for organizations, if you're interested. And I have a little bit longer version with some more interactive exercises to produce some more work product if you want to, for example, develop your ground rules and do some more stuff this way. That can be very helpful if you really want to work through a problem. And we just kind of, with a tailored program, you sort of hang out your linen, but you get a chance to function better. But thank you for your compliment. So I have a hand up from Karen. Try to see on the other screen if anybody else has.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Hi. I did see in the chat that someone posted a link to the recording that will be on the website for ILR. But I had put in the Q&A. Is it possible to get a copy of the PowerPoint? But that's not my real question. But that was in the Q&A. So.
Oh, it is not. Cornell considers it to be intellectual property, and they asked me not to share my PowerPoint slide. But certainly, if I do a program for a specific employer, necessarily, I do share the materials. But
right. Okay. Thank you. So my real question is, I belong to a labor union, and the meetings are run by the president, who seems not to have the chutzpah, as we say, or a stiff spine to be able to get people who tend to pontificate to stop them from talking. And she has enlisted me as the parliamentarian, and but I only deal with things that are outside Robert's Rules of Order, which is how we run our meetings. So when her mindset is, I feel everyone should have a chance to say what they want to say, which is really great, but it makes for very long meetings. And I don't know how to convey to this person that you should have a timer, 3 minutes. And if you've already asked a question, you need to go to the back of the queue, back of the line, and allow other people to speak before that person speaks again, because some people seem to want to ask multiple questions, like I just did when I asked you a question. But, they seem to ask like 2 or 3 questions on the same thing when there are other hands up and people want to ask questions. So how do I help our president stiffen her spine? I don't know how else to put it.
Well, I think there are a couple of the tools that I've talked about that might be possibilities. One of them is that I think besides having a parliamentarian, I really think you need a facilitator and a timekeeper. And because as a parliamentarian, if you're limited to what you can really do with that, it may very well be that a facilitator will assist in the spinal stiffening sort of area, but also the timekeeper can help to enforce that. And also, if you have on your agenda for each item a time set aside also for the questions or interactions with the group, or you might be able to say, look, if this issue is generating so much comment and interest, perhaps we need to hold a special meeting or have a task force work on that and not monopolize the current meeting with the one item, because you have other items you need to work on. There's several ways around that. And also, you might very well consider ground rules, where you basically have a ground rule that says a person is not allowed to dominate the conversation, or things like that. And you, as a group, agree on that ground rule, and then you can point to it. But some of these tools you just have to enforce them. You have to make them
Right.
and enforce them. That's the real trick.
Right, but if you've held, like, we've held meetings almost now for time wise, almost for 3 years, and she's never set out ground rules. So is it, when I tell her about this, she says, oh, we've done it so long without, I said, yeah, but you can
Nope.
change the ground rules. You're in charge of the meeting. And I just get pushback. And I belong to a group where when we have Zoom meetings, this is outside my union, that we have someone who is the secretary of the meeting, like the facilitator. And then we have separate people who are hosting, who their only job is to let people in and out of the meeting, who deals only with the audio part. That's two different people. We have a separate timer, and, we have separate jobs for people doing separate things. And that's all they focus on. They don't focus on so much what's going on in the meeting. They don't get to participate and speak in the meeting, because their job, if they've taken on that position, is to facilitate in the Zoom meeting, all the technical part, because of the, Zoom bombers that were happening when we first had our COVID thing. And it seems to work great. It's very, very organized. It's very well done.
Yes.
And we tell people, okay, 3 minutes are up, your time's up. And most people are respectful, and they said, okay, thank you very much for letting me talk. And then they
Yes.
go off. And then there are people that go on, and then you just say, okay, your 3 minutes are up. And they keep talking. And then you just have to say, okay, just to let you know, I'm going to mute you now, and try to be respectful and polite, but you can't, I don't know how else to do it. So thank you so much.
Yes.
The information is invaluable, I have to tell you. I appreciate all these Zoom classes that you guys are doing, especially you, Nellie. I appreciate everything you've
Thank you
done.
very much.
Okay, thank you.
My other suggestion for you is that on your next meeting agenda, I would put on there developing ground rules for meetings. Because you need to do that. The idea that you've met for 3 years and you're having this problems and you don't have rules says that you need rules. I think that's what it sounds like to me anyway. So I would say at your next meeting, that should be on the agenda and you do it.
Thank you.
And and you can have suggestions for them ahead of time, or you could ask your members to submit ideas for ground rules that you can then perhaps vote on, or do some consensus voting and multi-voting at the meeting. And one of the purposes of your meeting or outcomes that you expect is that you will have formulated ground rules, and it gets done. But that would be my suggestion. Is I think you need them.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay. So, any other questions or issues? We'll try and see if we have any other people I haven't heard from, but if anyone else has any questions or would like to make a comment on their meetings, or would like to share a story of the good meetings or the meetings from hell, I'm always interested. I get some interesting stories when people ask for help about meetings and you get the horrors. Okay, well, I'd like to thank you all for attending today and hope we'll see you at our next webinar in November. I'm trying to make sure that on your next link, I think Stephanie will have posted the topics for the entire series so that you can see what is coming up for the remaining 8 programs. And hopefully you'll find some things on there that will interest you or get something that you hadn't thought about cooking. So we'll look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Take care. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.